Cool. First off, I'll just say, hey everyone. Yeah, as Emily sort of echoed, the goal of these series is just to have a regular sort of cadence with the community, regular conversations. I used to do live streams in our Facebook group, maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. I used to do them pretty frequently. Haven't done them as much so, and this is sort of the next gen of those live streams. So yeah, any questions you have, anything you just want to ask about the product, about where it's going, about the company, this is the place to do so. We're going to be doing it on a regular basis. I think we have them scheduled for every 2 weeks. So feel free to pop in, ask a question, pop out. It's totally up to you. We're just going to try to give you more regular answers into what the company's doing. Okay, cool. I'm going to rapid fire through most of these, just so that if you have any product specific questions, we can dive into those. So best piece of advice I've been given, I'm going to answer this as it pertains to voice. It's likely that the best piece of advice would be the folks who actually go ahead and actually build solutions for an industry are the folks who actually sort of shape the opinion. I don't have the specific quote there, but thinking that something isn't possible based off of what others are doing is sort of a fallacy. It's really important that if you think something's possible, that you just go out and do it. I wish I could say that more elegantly, but yeah, the best piece of advice is don't look at what other people are doing. Just sort of do what you want to do, and you'd be surprised at sort of how many people will follow you and sort of what you're doing. So that'd be my piece of advice.
Awesome. Where should a builder get started with voice?
Sure. I think the most interesting places in voice are tasks that are highly repeatable. So things that you could do quite frequently. So again, the highly repeatable factor, where a voice interface just makes it like a lot better. So a really good equation to think about a voice app is there's an upfront cost to voice apps, and that you need to enable them. You need to sort of learn the commands, and so to justify that upfront cost, you need to have an action that voice makes really a lot better, and it needs to happen a lot, right? And so I think about voice commerce quite a bit. So ordering my coffee on the way to work, at least in the days where I could walk outside, that's a highly repeatable use case, and voice makes that really valuable. So things like commerce, sort of for routine purchases, obviously quizzes and entertainment, things that are, they're faster with voice. It's a much faster input speed. And even though there's a bit of an upfront cost, it's repeatable, so it justifies it. So any opportunity that sort of fits that equation is a good one. I see a lot of people where they, for example, might want to do like a survey through voice. But because there's going to be an upfront cost, if you're only going to do that survey once, it's actually not a good voice use case, as you're going to have that high upfront investment and the reward just isn't there. So you have to look for something that's highly repeatable, and ideally within a daily routine, so that not only is it repeatable, but you also get, you start to build sort of habits around it. So we actually built an Alexa skill before this called Storyflow. It was bedtime stories. It was a highly repeatable use case. Every single night, parents and their kids would do bedtime stories before bed, and that was a really good use case. So that's a good framework to think about sort of where opportunities are in voice, and where voice as an interface is really valuable. Cool. Are there any plans for multi-language support or translations? That's a great question. Multi-language support, yes. Translations, not at the moment. I've seen people experiment with the Google Translate API, where you can basically fire in text that you receive and then be able to translate it dynamically based off maybe the user's region. So that's quite cool. But we don't have any plans to make that sort of native in the product, but we do plan to do multi-language support. What do you read to guide your development? We don't read, we just talk to users. So all of you guys, I've tried to hop on as many calls. We've got around 30,000 users now, and myself and the whole team, we try to hop on as many calls as we can with users, and I would recommend anyone do that. So the idea behind our Facebook group, which is like 6,500 people now, was to get as much user feedback as possible. And that was the initial thesis, and it's still a large driving force of why the group is so important to us. It's just about getting user feedback, as you guys are the ones who are using the product and you're paying for the product and you're keeping us going. And so you're the most important people, you have the most important opinions. And there's no book on Voiceflow user feedback. So you just need to get out there and talk to people. And so that's generally what guides your development. Where would you like to see yourself in 10 years? This is like a personal question. I think Voiceflow has the opportunity to be a pretty impactful company. I think the problem that we're solving is really hard, but it's exciting in that what does the Photoshop or the sketch, the Figma of conversations look like? What's that standard, that universal toolkit that people can use to design conversations across a platitude of channels? That's a really hard problem, and I don't think we're going to solve that in the next 2 years. I think we're going to get a lot closer, but I think it's going to be a longer term problem. So in 10 years, I probably see myself continuing to sort of work on that problem, and as conversational AI just becomes a larger part of our lives. So hopefully Voiceflow continues to embed itself in there as well. Who do you look up to in the voice industry? Voice industry is it's like an odd term, because voice is more of an interface. It's less of like a specific industry. But I use voice industry as it's like an easy way to just group a bunch of companies together. But anyways, aside from the naming conventions, I really look up to the founders of Raza. I think they're great. I think Raza is a really cool product. I also like Jan at Jovo Tech quite a bit. I think Jovo is an awesome framework, and we're really excited to work with them more in future. I think those folks. There's a bunch. You could look at Milkana at Jargon. Of course, you could look at Brad at VoiceBot. There's just so many amazing folks in the space that's kind of hard to pick one. I think folks who are thinking about and like proactively trying to change the future are those who I really respect. I think there's a lot of folks in voice who just sort of scream at the top of their lungs, like, hashtag voice first. But they don't often, so sometimes we don't give the rationale for why and where voice is actually going to be impactful. And I think those who are proactively looking for these solutions and proactively trying to create the future, I definitely respect those folks. How did Voiceflow get started? How did the team meet? So Voiceflow got started about two and a half years ago now. Initially, we were a company called Fable. And so Fable was, the idea behind it was to help kids learn to read using Alexa. And so I ran a company before this called Flare, and I did that for about 3 years. And that's how I met Emily, actually. And that company failed. And so I think after failing my first startup, it was, you learn a lot about timing and why timing is so important. Because startups are a lot like surfing, and if you're the best surfer in the world, it doesn't matter if you don't have a good wave. And conversely, if you have a mediocre surfer but you have an amazing wave, you're going to look pretty good. So I think after our first startup, it was what's going to be a really good wave that we're going to be able to actually build a really impactful business in. And voice seemed like a really amazing technology. I had an Echo Dot pretty early in Canada, and I was playing around with that. We thought it was super interesting. So the first application that we thought of, the first use case, was helping kids learn to read using Alexa, where essentially Alexa would act as the parent, and they'd be able to go back and forth and tell stories with each other. And then that was called Fable. And then we had to change the name of the app to Storyflow because Alexa kept thinking it was Bible when kids would say open Fable. And so we had to change it to Storyflow. When it was Storyflow, we started to iterate. We were talking to users, and we had one story where we decided to offer kids a choice between hit the green button or the green button or the red button. And all of our users did not like our initial product. They thought the stories were really boring, but the kids loved the fact that they got one choice, and they kept playing the same story over and over again. And the reason for that was they just wanted to see whether choosing a different button actually changed the story. It didn't. You just got to make a choice. But that led us to the idea of doing interactive stories on Alexa, and that became Storyflow. That was the whole premise for the company. Storyflow became a really popular Alexa skill that we built. It had a bunch of great interactive stories on it for kids. It had games. It had just stories that we were actually writing. So I was writing the stories. I was flowcharting them out using Sketch, and then I would pass that over to Sketch and then Word documents for the actual sample dialogues and things. I would then pass those to Andrew or Tyler, and they would code them, and Mike would do all the sound. So Mike would be on GarageBand all day, playing with the audio and doing the audio files and things like that. And so we would then combine those and create these awesome stories, and we did that once a week. And that business actually was doing pretty well. We had thousands and thousands of users. We had a really active Facebook group of parents, and we actually raised $500,000 for that business, for Storyflow, which is really cool. And as the business evolved, the idea became to create like a YouTube for voice entertainment, where we didn't just want to create our own stories. We wanted to allow other people to create stories. And so we shifted the internal tooling that we'd built, which was now Voiceflow. That was an internal tool that we'd made to make it easier to build these stories faster. And we let other people use it. And when other people started to use it, they wanted to build their own apps and not just stories for Storyflow. And that's when the light bulb sort of flipped for us. And we decided to become a tooling company and help other people build, apps like Storyflow and many other types of use cases. So the long story made short is we were building Alexa skills ourselves, found it super difficult and frustrating, and decided to build our own tools. And now those are the tools that you guys use. So that's how we got started. How do you suggest we level up to become professional builders? Yeah, conversation design is a really deep topic. It's kind of like visual design, in that when you first take a look, you're like, oh, like you see good design, you're like, okay, like that, that seems fairly simple, rounded corners, you got a little bit of drop shadow, really nice color palette, I could probably do that. And then you try it yourself, and it's really complex. Conversation design is fairly similar. The hard part about conversation design, though, is that it's really hard to benchmark yourself against others. Whereas in visual design, I think everyone can intuitively say, that looks good and that doesn't, so obviously I'm not a good designer yet. Versus in conversation design, it's much harder to get that benchmark. And so I think when it comes to leveling up, it comes down to like a couple core concepts. So one is understanding. So I could go really deep into this topic. I'm just going to give some high-level tips, and then hopefully that helps lead you into a better place. One is understanding there's system-led design, and then there's user-led design, and then there's like a hybrid. So when you have an assistant talking with the user, if a really good conversation starts open-ended, let's imagine a Domino's like pizza skill. Excuse me. It goes like, hey, welcome to Domino's, how can I help you? That's an open-ended question. The user can say whatever they want. It's a user-led conversation right now. If we then pivot, excuse me, if we then pivot to now we need to take the user's order, we have a very set number of things that we need to get from the user, like topping 1, topping 2. We need to get maybe the type of crust. Now we need to shift to a system-led. So now the system is leading the conversation, saying, okay, what kind of topping do you want? What kind of cheese do you want? And so knowing when to pivot between an open conversation where it's user-led and a system-led conversation where the system is giving the user a set of choices is a really important concept, because it's going to allow you to create much better conversations that feel more human, right? So for example, if I go to a hotel and I say, hey, welcome to the Marriott Hotel, how can I help you? Open-ended, and then a normal human would then narrow down the scope. If I say something like, can I get a chicken sandwich? They're gonna be like, no, sorry, this is the Marriott Hotel. Here are the things you can do. You can book a room, you can do this, you can do this. So knowing when to go wide and then bring it back to the narrow, that's a really important concept. Another important concept in conversation design is just understanding context and building your intents in such a way where they're contextual. So going back to our pizza example, if you say hey, welcome to Domino's, how can I help you? And the user goes I need help. They're asking help with the generalized context of the app because they're at the very root flow. However, if they're now in the purchase flow and it's like, hey, I want to buy a pizza, and they say help, they're not asking for help from the wider context of the skill. They're asking for help within the specific context of the purchasing. And so you need to be able to have your intents be contextualized to build a really good conversation, so that your intents are specific to what the user is actually talking about. Is that's how a normal human would talk as well. So understanding context and being able to layer context within a conversation is a really important concept. We have that built within Voiceflow. That's the flows system and flows embedding. A lot of people don't know that this is the primary concept that Voiceflow is built around, is like these flows and being able to embed context. But happy to go into that in a later chat. Yeah, so that's a really important concept. And then also just situational design. So this is just being aware of like the state of the conversation. So saying if it's the user's birthday, wish them a happy birthday. Have a variance on your responses. Have 15 different welcome messages. Welcome them back on their 5th session and say, hey, it's your 5th session. Do things that a human would do and be hyper contextually aware. So not just contextually aware of your intents, but also the copy and the content. You want to make that more dynamic and have that change depending on the state of the conversation. So that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that was helpful and insightful. Where do you see Voiceflow in the next year, 2 years, and 5 years? 1 year, I think we have a long way to go in building sort of like the standard tool for teams who are designing and prototyping and ultimately building. So a lot of what we're focusing on now is team collaboration. We're seeing frequently the creation of the conversational product team within enterprises and within teams, where you may have a voice, like a voice startup, and let's say it's going to be 5 people. On that 5-person team, of course, you're going to have like the business people, but on the product team, you're going to have your conversation designer, your conversational developer, you're going to have your product manager, and then you're also going to have like legal and marketing potentially at bigger companies. We want to build that central platform that gives you a place to collaborate and a language to collaborate with. So for example, the developer, if we want to be able to help them by having API integrations and custom code and Voiceflow, bring them into the platform, give the designer a way to visualize their thoughts. So being able to put more data onto the canvas to really explain the concepts, and then giving the copywriters a really good authoring environment. So things like the SSML editor, bringing all of these pieces alongside collaboration for the PM, commenting system, bring all these different people into one platform to give them a really great collaborative experience. So that's what we're focusing on a lot this year. The next 2 years, you can expect to use Voiceflow for more than just Alexa and Google. The way we've built out our architecture and the way we've even built out our design system is it's meant to be very modular. So I could get into the technical aspects, but you could imagine using Voiceflow for other conversational platforms. Whether it's a voice platform or a chat platform, you could imagine being able to do so. The one thing that's really different about Voiceflow is we don't intend to be like the full stack. So we're not trying to build our own NLP and NLU. We're not trying to build, our own like backends. We just want to give you, the creators, like a visual interface that can then integrate with all the other technologies you want to use. So we're not trying to replace other technology stacks. We're just trying to be sort of that design, that collaborative interface that can then integrate and eventually export code to multiple different platforms. So that's the next 2 years. Next 5 years, I'm just speaking in terms of features. It's really hard to predict 5 years. I think I can predict 2 years with some accuracy, but there's a really good startup quote that's, you can only forecast as long as you've been in business. And so we've been in business for 2 years now. So I feel like I can look forward 2 years. We haven't been in business for 5, so it's hard to forecast out 5 years. But if I had to take a guess, it's probably continuing on our 2-year goal, plus adding in analytics and probably integrating with a lot of other tools in the space is definitely a goal we want to do within 5 years, to sort of have Voiceflow be that central hub, be that fabric that you can then integrate with your CMS system, external analytics tools, integrate with other platforms, things like that. That's probably a longer term goal. What is the VF office's favorite activity to do together? So Voiceflow kind of has like a couple different like groups of people who do different activities together. So we have this is when we were in the office. We would have folks who'd play ping pong after work. We have folks who would play. We have a TV with like video games. So they play like Super Smash Bros or something like that. I'd say we like going to dinner together. We've done that a couple of times now, and that's always really fun. So yeah, there isn't like a one activity that we all do. Actually, apart from hackathons, we still do hackathons internally where we'll be given a theme, like, okay, productivity tools, and we'll have to go and build a voice app to sort of for this theme, and we'll have a couple hours. It's a really good way for us to make sure that we're still using the product ourselves every day and understanding, what are the issues, what could be better, what's doing really well. So that's something we do quite frequently. How's your vision changed for Voiceflow since you first started? It's changed a lot. Initially, it was very much like a Wix for voice. That was like sort of like our concept that we were pitching. Make it really easy for people to build voice apps, as voice apps are going to be similar to websites. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think voice is going to have a much broader. It's going to have a much broader impact. It's not going to be as deep. So I don't think it's going to be like I don't think you're going to see like these massive, like hugely complex voice apps, at least not in the next 2 years, and this might change. But I think you're going to see a ton of voice apps across a ton of different industries. So I think you're going to see, pharmaceutical, airlines, you're going to see logistics, warehousing, cruise ships, hotels, like all these different industries are going to want to adopt a voice. It's a better interface. It's a more cleanly interface. It's a more universally accessible interface. And so I think we've just started to realize that now that, voice isn't just Alexa, Google. It's a much broader shift. And then I think we've also realized that the professional workflow is not just like go and build the thing, but like within enterprises, within professional teams, there's many different segments of the workflow. There are conversation designers, there are UX designers who are going to build out prototypes. There's like external stakeholders like legal and marketing. You need to have a say. You have product managers, you have developers. And so initially we were only thinking about building. Now we think a lot more about the design, the creative process. And that's a pretty big focus for us, is streamlining that whole workflow. So that's changed quite a bit. And I think our vision has gone much more towards being like a universal creative platform compared to like a universal build platform.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Braden. We have a few questions that have been pinged to me and some that are in the group chat. So the first one that's there is, what do you think is the most recent promising development in voice tech?
Visuals, for sure. I've seen some voice apps demoed now that have just like blown my mind. One of them in particular was one of our users is building, they're working with a customer. It's essentially like rebuilding TV channels, where you'll be able to be like, hey, Alexa, like show me, bring me to this channel. And then once you're in that channel, it's like, bring me to this stream, bring me to that stream, bring up this player's profile. Just a really cool use case to reinvent TV channels. And I think that's going to become increasingly important as you see Chromecast and Fire TV, which is Alexa enabled. Not to mention Samsung Bixby and all the millions and millions of TVs they have. I think that's just going to become an increasingly cool place, is sort of the TV space. But of course, like mobile and visuals, it's just like visuals is going to change everything, and we're thinking very hard about how we do visuals well. As right now we have a very basic implementation of APL, but I think you can expect some pretty big advancements from us on that.
The next question is, if you have a magic wand, what would you do differently with Voiceflow?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think I would increase our visual support. I also think, I would just complete our roadmap. We have so many things planned. I would just tap our roadmap and it'd be done. the roadmap's never done, but that would be the number one thing. If I could change something today, I think I would improve our test tool. If I could just choose one thing, I think our prototyping tool is our biggest asset and our biggest liability at the same time. I think it does a really good job of showing you the logic flow, but if you're new to Voiceflow for incoming users, it's really hard to understand that our prototype tool doesn't have the same NLP and NLU of Alexa and Google, and so you're going to have different results between the prototype and the actual build. And that's why we actually, if you guys notice, we changed the label from test to prototype, and we did that thinking that we wanted people to know that this is a prototype first. It's not a one-to-one test. And so that would probably be like my number one most painful thing, apart from our onboarding, but that's going to be getting a facelift like next couple of weeks. Yeah, definitely our prototyping tool.
Awesome. Another question in here. How soon do you think voice commerce will start getting more traction, or are we there already?
Yeah, we're there already. There's millions of dollars being transacted through voice commerce, like billions actually, but a lot of it's going through the big platforms. I think what we're gonna start to see is more creative third-party use cases. So direct to consumer apps. The most obvious use case for voice commerce for me is the subscription services, like the subscription D2C services like Dollar Shave Club and those. It makes total sense for them to have, hey, check my order, hey, reorder that same thing from last time, browse categories, things like that. I think that'll be really interesting. I think what we're going to need to see is more third-party payment integrations, so like Shopify integrations, Stripe integrations, these types of things. I think once that comes into play further, and I think that'll be in the next year to two, I think it'll be really interesting. But you could totally like make a business in voice commerce today. I think you just have to be really thoughtful on which use cases you're pursuing. As a lot of folks, voice commerce right now in its current phase will only replace, like 1% of the current e-commerce landscape, and you have to search for those use cases which make more sense using voice and provide, an order of magnitude improvement. So that's really, really important, is just being thoughtful with use cases, and I think you'll find success.
So, the next question is around APIs. As of right now, are there any plans to add more integration blocks or more API blocks in the canvas?
Great question. Have we roadmapped it out? Not this quarter. Is it something we think about all the time? Yeah. I think the reason we actually added a Zapier integration is because Zapier is kind of like the mother of all integrations. It's like the integrations integrator. And so that was our hacky way of just like giving you thousands of integrations through another integration. Same with the API block. But, we get companies reach out to us all the time on how can they integrate with Voiceflow. That's something that I think you'll see coming up definitely within the next year, 2 years, for like 100%. I don't have an exact timeline, but yeah, and if you have ideas for apps that you think would be like clear winners, like for example, Airtable would be a clear winner. If you have ideas for other ones, maybe Firebase, let us know. Shoot me an email. Shoot Emily an email. As we're gonna continue to build up that list in the back of our head, and one day, yeah, you'll see like 50 different integrations there.
Another question from the community: how do you see Voiceflow and Alexa being leveraged further in the new worlds that we live in today?
Yeah, so we've seen massive usage increases both on Voiceflow and the actual end usage. So like I shared a tweet the other day. We've seen Alexa and Google usage double in terms of end user usage, at least for the skills hosted on Voiceflow. So take that as you will. I think a lot of people are just gonna, in certain scenarios, are just gonna opt to talk instead of touch, like sort of the phrase I've been using. I think you're gonna see the first use cases, I think you'll see it replace are public spaces actually, which is interesting because initially I was thinking that it was gonna be starting with individual consumers in their homes and then it was gonna sort of propagate outwards. I now think that you're going to see public spaces start to introduce Alexa more as they want to replace touchscreens, or at least they want to augment touchscreens. I think a really common misconception with voice is that it's going to replace things. I think the better framing is voice is just going to be added to things. And so I think, if I go to McDonald's today and I use their touchscreen, 1,000 other people today have used that touchscreen. I think it's not a crazy thing at all to say they could just label, or you could add a voice interface so so-easily to their touchscreen. And instead of me touching it, I just say, like, give me that burger, give me the number 1, give me the number 2, give me, add cheese, things like that. Because it already has the visual display. And so I think you're going to see a lot more of that in the public spaces. And I think then that'll propagate into our personal lives. And eventually I'm going to have, like, my phone here. And what we're going to have is, I'm going to have an app like Uber, and it's going to have voice only interface capabilities. So if my phone's laying down, as soon as you add a voice interface, you kind of have the expectation that it could also just be a voice, like just voice input, voice output. So you need to be able to handle just voice. You also need to be able to handle voice first. So now I'm just talking to my phone, but it's giving me the visual output. And of course, I also need the traditional visual only. So I think you're going to see a lot of these sort of multimodal apps that have 3 different interface combinations. And that's going to be the way that every app is expected to work. Like, I should be able to use my phone without touching it if I want to. But if I'm on the subway and I don't want people to hear where I'm going, I can just use the visual interface. So voice isn't going to replace everything. It's going to be added to everything. And that's going to create tremendous opportunity for conversation designers. Not because of the number 2 and number 3 modality combinations I mentioned. So adding a voice first interface it's not crazy. It's kind of just like voice commands. If every app also has to have that voice only interaction, which they're going to have to if they have a voice interface, it's going to become an expectation. That's where tremendous opportunity is created for conversation designers. Is voice only interactions are really that's where you start designing. So I think all multimodal apps, I think conversation designers will be working mostly on mobile apps for the next couple of years, because they're going to have to start out designing voice only interactions, and then they're going to have to figure out how to layer on visuals, and then finally how to have just a visual only interaction that works within the schema of a voice only interaction. So yeah, it'll be really interesting seeing these modalities shift. And I think there's going to be, like, tremendous career opportunities, and that's why the Voiceflow team, we're betting years of our lives on this reality.
This is a nice little segue into the next question that's here. But in the future, do you see an opportunity for Alexa, Google, Siri, any of the assistants that are out there working together on a platform?
Yeah, it's. So I'm going to preface this by saying I have no idea, and then I'll give you my best guess. My best guess would be no, and the reason for that is, I think the time is past. Like, in an ideal world, what you would have is all the voice platforms share a combined sort of number of voice apps. So it'd be like the World Wide Web, where each voice assistant would be like a browser. And each of them would have their own settings, their own personality, and you would choose a voice assistant based off your browser preferences. The same as how you choose Chrome versus Safari versus Mozilla versus Internet Explorer. Same concept. That would be sort of like the ideal from a consumer standpoint. The only problem is, if that was the reality for all of us, voice would take forever to proliferate, because when you have a shared standard like that, it takes forever to innovate. It takes a long time. And so I think it's good that the independent assistants are able to push out features on a monthly basis because they're independent. But of course, it isn't going to create the same distribution. And so I think what we're going to end up seeing is something very similar to mobile. I think there will be niche use cases for independent assistants, but I don't think the independent assistants will become platforms, if that makes sense. I think there'll be applications. I think Alexa and Google, and then potentially Siri and Bixby, those will become the dominant platforms, the iOS and Androids of sort of the next generation of computing, which will be conversational AIs that are proactive. I don't really see, I don't really see them interacting too well with each other. The same as you don't really see that happening with Android and iOS. They're just going to build their walled gardens, and us as developers and designers are going to have to be able to design for both, the same as you'd have to do so for iOS and Android.
Could you walk us through what your day would look like if it was voice first or voice only?
Sure. So, I mean, you do need visual only. There will be scenarios where that's pretty key. But if my day was voice first or voice only, kind of interesting thought experiment. I'd get up, I'd do the exact same thing I do today. I use my smart speakers for everything in the mornings. So I've got 4 smart speakers in like an 800 square foot condo that I share with 2 roommates. So we have a ton of these things. So I'd order my coffee on the way to work. I'd be setting my timers. I'd use my smart speaker to check my calendar. I have a Google Hub. I really like the Nest Hub. That's like my main visual one. And then I have an Alexa Show 8. I have that in my room. I'd use those. I use Alexa skills mainly during my commute. So that's when I'm getting weather. That's when I'm listening to podcasts, and that's when I would likely order a coffee. So I'd order a Starbucks or order an Uber. At work, it's going to be visual only for sure. I think a lot of the work that we do is still going to be dominated by visual only, because I think there are some things that platforms, and I wrote a whole blog post on this if you're interested, but platforms don't replace each other fully. Platforms just augment new capabilities that weren't possible before. So me ordering an Uber on my walk to work, while listening to music on Spotify and then saying, hey, Alexa, like order me a coffee from the Starbucks on Spadina. That's a new capability because I don't even have to touch my phone. At work, I'm still going to use my laptop for work, because that's like the core competency of a laptop. It's a work machine. I'm still going to use mobile for Instagram and things like that. It's like that's the core competency, is sort of that visual deep engagement applications. And then voice is going to be those like very fast, routine based, high frequency tasks. That's going to replace everything voice. That's ordering. That's going to be reloading my public transit card. That's going to be ordering Uber. That's going to be ordering Starbucks. That'll be interacting with some entertainment. When I'm at home and I want to watch a Netflix show, I'm not going to touch the remote. I'm going to ask which movie I want to watch. I'm going to browse that way. So that voice first interface. So yeah, you're going to use a platitude of platforms. It's not going to be just one. And I think that's the same. That's the way it's always been for technology shifts, and that'll be the same for voice. Hopefully that answered your question. It wasn't too much of a cop-out, but feel free to read the blog post if you'd like to learn more there.
We will link to the blog post that Braden's referring to with the recording of this as well. So don't worry, there'll be tons of time to kind of go through that as well. Another interesting and I think very topical question. Braden, you've been posting a lot of charts lately in terms of how voice is trending and what you've seen from Voiceflow. What kind of long-standing trends do you see this pandemic will leave on voice, and how do you think that's going to impact the adoption?
Yeah, I think it's going to rapidly accelerate like the sales cycle for a lot of companies that are in voice, because it's a much easier sell now. Before it was like, do I really need this like touch-free interface? And now it's like, the hand sanitizer companies are blowing up. Like the companies that, sanitize your phone are, raising tremendous amounts of money. It's a much easier sell, in my opinion. So I think in terms of the voice space, you're just going to see that adoption accelerate. I think people are going to be a lot more open to it. So that's sort of on the development of new applications. I think in terms of existing applications, you're going to see an increased number of use cases emerge. Because the good thing about, there's never a good thing about the pandemic, but one of the silver linings is that the voice platforms are run by big companies that are pretty resilient to this. And so that innovation is going to continue to happen from Alexa and Google and Samsung. That's not going to slow down. If anything, they're going to continue to speed up, as they're all sort of in arms race to build, the omnipresent assistant. And so, yeah, I think things are going to accelerate. I think apps are going to get more usage. I think a lot more people are just trying voice apps as they're at home more, and we all have these like little talking speakers in our houses, and people are just, they've been looking at it, they've been using it for music and weather, and they've been stuck at home for a month now. They're asking it questions, or they're starting to find out what else it can do. So I think it's going to have a pretty long-lasting impact in terms of accelerating the adoption.
Are there any plans of opening up a way for the community to contribute, whether it is feature ideas or even actual integration blocks in the future?
Yeah, we will have a Voiceflow API at some point in the future, and you will be able to build your own integrations. In terms of timeline, I could be talking months, I could be talking years, but it will happen. we are very adamant on, like, we have this great community, and I think together, we power over 6% of all Alexa skills now, and that's only going to increase, by a pretty fast pace. So the more that we as a community can innovate and create best practices and create templates and create standards, for example, if we were to create an awesome visuals platform, and then someone in the community create an awesome visuals template, that could, in theory, like completely redefine the visual, like the standards of what a visual skill on Alexa looks like, and that could be created by a Voiceflow template. It's because we do power a significant number of the skills on the store. So yeah, we do plan to release an API at some point. We do plan to get more community involvement, whether it's through shared templates, whether it's through a marketplace of integration blocks. We're thinking about all this stuff, and it's really exciting.
We have another question in here. Is there an opportunity for developers to monetize from the templates that they build?
Not yet, but I think that's an opportunity you could technically do right now, as you do have Voiceflow download links on the actual project, so you could technically monetize today with those templates. I don't think we have any plans right now to sort of do what you see on WordPress and have these monetizable templates. That's not as much our business model. We're focusing much more on building the tooling, and I think these community features will sort of be in that like 2-year plus bucket of work. I think right now we need to perfect the platform, and we need your help to understand what we need to do to build a better authoring and a better creative platform. And once we've done that, I think that's when you start to add the peripheral services around, whether that's community marketplaces or community integrations and things like that.
Yeah, and I can dive in a little bit on that as well. One of the things that we've really been thinking about on the growth side is more opportunities for us to put a stamp of approval on the people that are in the community that are pro Voiceflow developers, so that you guys have that, you have that backing in order to be able to sell more, whether it's to clients, templates, things like that. So that is something that I think is pretty tied within that. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is we are regularly thinking about ways to open up what our existing Voiceflow marketplace looks like and make those clonable components and templates more accessible. So I do see a future where there will be opportunities for us to feature, whether it's the creator or the templates that they built, and be able to link to a way that they could potentially monetize that. There's a follow-up to that is it an encouraged practice though? What I would say is that we do have a really large community of people who are pro developers, who help build for different clients, who are on Upwork, who are on Fiverr, things like that are working with other clients. So I think in that aspect, any work that you're doing that is part of your business, obviously that's encouraged. Like we want the creators on our platform to be able to make money off this, to be able to really help build out what the infrastructure looks like and what the industry looks like. In terms of templates specifically, we're always open to ideas there. So if you have any specific questions or any ideas on how we can help, feel free to message myself or Braden.
Great. Are there any more questions?
Let's see. We have One more. So one more question from the community is, are there any ways right now that people from the community can get more involved with the Voiceflow team?
This is probably a best actually a question for Emily.
Sure. So there's tons of ways. One of the big things that we really care about is continuing to scale the quality of the groups that we have. And also one of the big things, or one of the subcategories for that, is creating localized content, creating localized leaders. The big and beautiful thing about voice is, unlike websites or other SaaS platforms that are very visual, there's a lot of, or even like a greater emphasis on that localization, the accents, the connotations, and really being able to get leaders around the world an opportunity to moderate, to help grow, to create workshops, to work closer with the team and make sure that we're supporting multi-language or more localized content is really important. So we're always looking for global leads. We're always looking for people who are interested in hosting workshops or contributing even to docs or to third-party things that we're working on. So if you have any specific questions about that, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to chat.
Great. Yeah, so I guess to wrap up here, hopefully this was interesting. Maybe let us know in the chat if you thought this was useful. We're going to run this, I think, every 2 weeks. So it's just a good time to catch up. You can ask any questions. Maybe that's too frequent of a cadence and we can switch it to monthly.
We've got it once a month, Braden, is once a month currently.
There we go. Okay, so let us know if it should be more frequent. But yeah, right now, so set it once a month, just to chat about things that are happening with the company, with the platform, with the community. Please let us know if this was a good format. Maybe it needs to be more of a live stream. Maybe it needs to be more prepared questions. Let us know. Let us know you want to change. Of course, your feedback is what drives the platform. It's what drives our company. That doesn't exclude these webinars, of course. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for organizing. And it was great to see everyone.
Yeah, we have a few more things that are coming up this week and next month. So as you guys have noticed, we've been trying to put together more and more events that will help level up or help connect with leaders in the space. So we do have another Fix It Hour with Nico coming up. So if you're working on a project or you want to see how our in-house experts tackles some really interesting problems, we have another session tomorrow. We are also doing a panel for the first time on venturing into voice. So we're talking with True Ventures, who actually funded Voiceflow, as well as Canvas Ventures, to think about how are VCs really thinking about voice. So where do they see the future going? And then lastly, for May so far, we have an AMA with Kathy Pearl, who is literally the person who wrote the book on conversational experience design and is the head of conversation design at Google. She is unbelievable and has a ton to say in terms of how people should be thinking about building for voice. So if you're interested, that one is also happening at the end of May. And you can check those out on our events page. And as you guys know, please let us know if there's anything that we can do in our community group. You guys are all amazing to be part of that. And we do read everything that comes through. So we really do appreciate all the time that you guys are taking. So thanks so much for joining in, guys. Please stay tuned and check out our events page for anything else that's coming up. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.